The knife blade glinted in the harsh sunlight as the scorpion prepared to shave Sarah Miller's head. Her face, bruised and bloodied, contorted in terror as the crowd roared for her humiliation. Then, a gunshot cracked through the air. The knife flew from the scorpion's hand, spinning into the dust. All eyes turned to see a lone figure standing at the edge of the square, Winchester rifle raised, smoke still curling from the barrel. "Next one won't be aimed at your knife," the man said, his voice cutting through the sudden silence like a blade. This was how justice arrived in Rattlesnake Gulch, at the end of Jackson Morgan's gun. 3 shots had already rung out that morning when Sheriff Marcus Cole fired into the sky, futile attempts to disperse the bloodthirsty crowd. "Cut her hair off," a drunken voice demanded. "Teach the thief a lesson," another joined in. Sarah Miller, a 25-year-old widow, trembled as she was bound to the town's whipping post. Blood trickled from a gash on her cheekbone, where Blackwood's men had struck her. Her crime? Stealing a piece of dried meat from Victor Blackwood's supply wagon to quiet the hunger that had gnawed at her for 3 days. The year was 1873. Rattlesnake Gulch had transformed from a dusty outpost to a bustling trading center after the Pacific Railroad's completion. But 3 years of drought had bankrupted farmers, left cowboys unemployed, and sent food prices soaring. The town had become a powder keg, and Sarah Miller was the spark. Sheriff Cole stood uselessly by, a man whose badge had been purchased rather than earned. His loyalties lay with Victor Blackwood, the richest rancher in the county and the man whose pockets ran deepest. "This thief," bellowed one of Blackwood's men, yanking Sarah's head back by her hair, "stole from Mr. Blackwood himself. The punishment will fit the crime." Children watched wide-eyed from boardwalks. Merchants observed from doorways. No one dared intervene. No one except Jackson Morgan. Morgan had ridden into town for supplies, not trouble. At 42, his weathered face bore the scars of a life lived hard. The Civil War had left him with nightmares and a pronounced limp from a Confederate bullet at Antietam. Since then, he'd built Lone Star Ranch into one of the finest spreads in the territory, though the memory of his wife Emma, taken by smallpox 3 years prior, kept him mostly to himself. He dismounted outside the general store, his tall frame drawing little attention until he heard the commotion. Inside, he questioned the storekeeper. "What's happening out there?" "Some drifter woman stole meat from Blackwood. They're making an example of her. Gonna shave her head before whipping her raw." Morgan's jaw tightened. Blackwood, always the same. As he approached the crowd, something about his presence, the calm, lethal intensity in his eyes, made men step aside. What he saw made his blood boil. The young woman beaten and tied, while the Scorpion McCoy, Blackwood's notorious gunman, prepared to cut her hair. When Morgan looked closer at Sarah, a jolt of recognition hit him. Those eyes, unmistakably Captain John Miller's eyes. Memories flooded back. Miller pushing him into a shell crater at Gettysburg, seconds before a Confederate volley would have killed him, Miller's body riddled with bullets as he saved their entire unit. His dying words a plea to look after his family if Morgan ever crossed paths with them. The nightmares that had haunted Morgan for years flashed through his mind. The smell of gunpowder, the screams of dying men. Miller's blood soaking into the soil as he extracted a promise from Morgan, with steady hands betraying none of the turmoil within. Morgan raised his Winchester and fired. After disarming the Scorpion and forcing him to cut Sarah loose, Morgan tossed a pouch of gold at his feet. "That's 20 times what the meat was worth. Debt paid." The Scorpion's grin was venomous. "Blackwood doesn't want payment. He wants respect." "And I want you to leave the girl alone," Morgan countered, his Colt Peacemaker now in hand. "So it seems we're at an impasse." The Scorpion's eyes narrowed as he weighed the odds. Morgan's reputation was legendary. During the war, they said he could shoot the eye out of a hawk at 300 yards. After the war, He'd put down 3 rustlers in a fair fight outside Fort Smith. "This ain't over," the Scorpion finally growled, signaling to untie Sarah. "It never is," Morgan replied. The ride to Lone Star Ranch passed in silence. Sarah, barely conscious, clung to Morgan's saddle as they approached the sprawling ranch house. At his call, Juan Rodriguez, a Mexican man who'd worked for Morgan for 7 years, emerged from the barn, his wife Martha close behind. "Dios mío," Martha gasped, rushing to help Sarah down. "What happened?" "Blackwood's men," Morgan said grimly. "Get her cleaned up and fed." Inside, after Martha had tended her wounds, Sarah finally spoke. "Why risk yourself for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Morgan stood by the fireplace, flames dancing across his face, highlighting a scar that ran along his jawline. "I knew your father, Captain John Miller." Sarah's eyes widened. "My father? But how?" "He saved my life at Gettysburg, took Confederate bullets meant for me and a dozen others." Morgan's voice remained steady, but his eyes reflected old pain that had never fully healed. His last words were making me promise that if I ever crossed paths with his family, I'd look after them. Morgan limped slightly as he moved to sit across from her, his hand unconsciously rubbing his left thigh where the old war wound ached when memories or storms approached. "I keep my promises, Miss Miller, even when they come calling 15 years later." That night, Morgan dreamed of Gettysburg again. The cannon fire, the smoke, the cries of wounded men. Only this time, when Captain Miller fell, his face transformed into Sarah's, her eyes accusing Morgan of failing to save her. He woke drenched in sweat, reaching for the whiskey he kept by his bed but stopping himself. He'd need clear eyes in the days ahead. As Sarah's strength returned, Morgan showed her how to survive in the harsh territory. When teaching her to shoot his Remington Derringer, he noticed her hands trembling. "I can't," she whispered. "I've never hurt anything." Morgan's voice softened. "Neither had I until the war. But out here, it's not about hurting. It's about surviving. Sometimes the two go hand in hand." They were interrupted by the howl of a wolf, too close to the house. Morgan grabbed his rifle, but as they stepped onto the porch, they saw a gray wolf attacking one of the calves in the nearest pen. "Take the shot," Morgan urged, offering her the Derringer. Sarah's hands shook violently. "I can't." "You can. Breathe in. Then out slowly as you squeeze. Don't pull." The wolf looked up, blood on its muzzle. Sarah steadied her arm, exhaled, and fired. The wolf yelped, wounded in the shoulder, and fled. "You saved that calf," Morgan said. "Sometimes taking a life means saving one. That's the law of this land." Sarah stared at the gun in her hand, something shifting in her eyes. "My father understood that, didn't he?" Morgan nodded, a memory of Captain Miller's face flashing before him. "Better than most." On the 4th morning, Juan galloped in from the north boundary. "Riders coming, Señor Morgan. Blackwood's men." Morgan grabbed his Winchester, his legs stiffening with the sudden movement. He stepped onto the porch as 5 horsemen arrived, the Scorpion leading. "Morgan," he called, "Mr. Blackwood wants the girl. She's to be tried according to his law." "There's no such thing as Blackwood's law in this territory," Morgan replied, his Winchester held casually but ready. "The debt's been paid. She's under my protection now." The Scorpion's face twisted. "Morgan, you've got 24 hours to hand her over, or Blackwood will burn every inch of your land, starting with your cattle." Morgan chambered around, the click carrying in the still air. "I've got enough ammunition for 30 men like you. Try it." As the riders departed, Sarah approached. "I should leave. This isn't your fight." Morgan shook his head. "Blackwood's been looking for an excuse to come after my water rights for years. If it wasn't you, it'd be something else." His voice dropped. "Besides, I've failed enough promises in my life. I won't fail this one." Later, as Morgan checked the ammunition stores, Sarah discovered a hidden compartment in the ranch house floorboards. Inside was a leather pouch containing a crude map and a gold nugget the size of a walnut. A note in faded ink read, JM, the real reason they're hunting me, Rattlesnake Canyon. Keep Sarah safe. Capt Miller. Sarah's hands trembled. Her father had found gold, significant gold, and someone had killed him for it. Had Blackwood known all along? That afternoon, Morgan rode to town to see Judge Wallace, the only man in the county who didn't fear Blackwood. The elderly judge listened while polishing his spectacles. Blackwood's overreaching, Wallace agreed, but he owns most of the county, including that useless sheriff. I need legal documentation that Sarah's debt is settled, Morgan explained. Something official. The judge nodded. I can draw up papers, but they'll need witnesses, men willing to stand against Blackwood. By nightfall, Morgan had assembled a small group. Bill Sharpshooter Johnson, a former Buffalo soldier whose aim rivaled Morgan's own. 2 Arrows, an Apache scout who'd worked with Morgan during his Army days, and Patrick O'Malley, the Irish blacksmith who'd suffered under Blackwood's monopolistic pricing. Gentlemen, Morgan addressed them, I'm not asking you to fight, just to witness. But Blackwood won't take this lying down. About time someone stood up to that snake, O'Malley growled. Morgan didn't mention Sarah's discovery about the gold map. Some secrets were best kept hidden, even from allies. Riding back under moonlight, 2 Arrows suddenly raised a hand for silence. Riders, he whispered, in the pines ahead. Before Morgan could respond, gunfire erupted from the trees. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness as bullets whizzed past. Morgan rolled from his horse, his old wound sending fire up his leg as he took cover behind a fallen log. I count 10 of them, Sharpshooter called, his Henry rifle barking steadily. For 10 minutes the forest echoed with gunfire. Morgan took a bullet that grazed his arm. As he worked his way around the flank, his bad leg nearly betrayed him when he stumbled on loose rocks. A bullet whizzed past his ear, close enough that he felt its heat. Finally, Sharpshooter's deadly accuracy turned the tide. 3 of Blackwood's men fell, and the rest retreated. That was just the opening shot, Morgan told his bloodied allies as they regrouped. Blackwood's going to bring everything next time. Back at the ranch, Sarah confronted Morgan with the map. This is why Blackwood wants me, isn't it? Not for a piece of dried meat. Morgan studied the map grimly. Your father found something valuable in Rattlesnake Canyon. Something worth killing for. And worth dying for, Sarah said quietly. We should use it against Blackwood somehow. Morgan nodded, an idea forming. We might just do that. As they prepared for the coming attack, Morgan discovered one of his ranch hands missing. Juan found the man's body in a gully, a knife in his back, and Blackwood's brand burned into his cheek. He was Blackwood's spy, Morgan realized, which means they know exactly how many men we have and where our defenses are weakest. That night, despite the danger, or perhaps because of it, Morgan finally told Sarah about his wife Emma, how they'd built the ranch together, how the smallpox had taken her while he was away delivering cattle, how he'd returned to find her already buried. I promised her I'd keep the ranch safe, he said, his voice rough with emotion rarely displayed. Just like I promised your father I'd keep you safe if our paths ever crossed. I've failed one promise already. I won't fail again. Sarah placed her hand over his. You haven't failed either of them, and you won't fail now. By dawn, Lone Star Ranch had been transformed. Morgan had moved the cattle to the high pasture, sent Martha to safety, and fortified the house. But he'd also made a strategic change to the plan based on Sarah's discovery. O'Malley, Morgan instructed, those dynamite charges by the north approach, we're moving them to the east side instead. But they'll come from the north, O'Malley protested. That's what they expect us to think, Morgan replied. but they'll split their forces and come from both sides. As the sun rose, dust clouds appeared on the horizon. "Here they come," Sharpshooter said grimly. 20 riders approached, with Blackwood himself alongside the Scorpion. They halted just beyond rifle range. "Morgan!" Blackwood's voice boomed across the distance. "Send out the girl and surrender your water rights." Morgan stepped onto the porch, Winchester in hand, his bad legs screaming with pain he refused to show. "Go home, Blackwood. This doesn't have to end in blood." Blackwood's response was to signal his men forward, but instead of charging directly, the force split, half circling to attack from the east side, exactly as Morgan had predicted. The first wave of riders charged toward the ranch, guns blazing. Morgan and Sharpshooter picked off 2 immediately. When the eastern group tried to flank them, O'Malley's repositioned dynamite exploded, sending horses and men flying. For 20 minutes, gunfire raged from all directions. Smoke filled the air as buildings caught fire. Morgan's leg threatened to buckle as he limped from position to position, his Winchester dealing death with each shot. Sarah proved her worth, using the shotgun to drive back 2 men who tried to enter through the kitchen. The look in her eyes had changed, the terror replaced by grim determination. As the battle raged, Morgan spotted Blackwood conferring with the Scorpion behind an overturned wagon. They were looking at what appeared to be the gold map. Somehow they'd obtained a copy. It was never about the meat or the water rights, Morgan realized. It was always about the gold. Most of Blackwood's men had fallen or retreated, but the Scorpion was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked behind Morgan. He turned to find the Scorpion inside the house, holding Sarah with a knife to her throat. "Drop the rifle, Morgan," the Scorpion hissed, "or she dies like her father." Morgan slowly lowered his Winchester. "You killed Captain Miller," he said, the pieces finally fitting together. "For the gold map." The Scorpion grinned. "Blackwood paid well for that job, just like he'll pay for finishing you and taking the girl to Rattlesnake Canyon." "You're forgetting something," Morgan said calmly. "I taught her how to shoot." In that instant, Sarah drove her elbow into the Scorpion's ribs and twisted away. His knife slashed her arm, but she was clear of his grip. Morgan drew his peacemaker with lightning speed, but his shot went wide as his bad leg collapsed under him. The Scorpion lunged forward, knife raised. Morgan, fallen to one knee, seemed defenseless, until a shot rang out. The Scorpion froze, a look of surprise on his face before crumpling to the floor. Behind him stood Sarah, Morgan's Derringer smoking in her hand. "You were right," she said, her voice steady despite the blood running down her arm. "Sometimes you have to take a life to save one." Outside, Blackwood found himself surrounded by Sharpshooter, 2 Arrows, and O'Malley. "Victor Blackwood," Morgan said, limping onto the porch with Sarah at his side, "you're under arrest for the murder of Captain John Miller and too many other crimes to count." The trial was swift but fair. Judge Wallace presided as witnesses testified to Blackwood's crimes. When Sarah produced the original gold map and her father's note, the final piece of evidence fell into place. Blackwood was sentenced to hang. His illegal land claims invalidated. His empire crumbled to dust. As Morgan and Sarah stood on the porch of Lone Star Ranch afterward, he asked, "What will you do about the gold?" Sarah looked out over the land, no longer the terrified woman he'd rescued. "My father died for it, but I won't let it destroy more lives. I'm donating half to help farmers affected by the drought, and using the rest to build something that would make him proud." Morgan nodded, satisfied. He would be proud already. The town council offered Morgan the sheriff's badge, but he declined, recommending Sharpshooter instead. "I'm just a rancher with a bad leg and too many ghosts," he explained. That evening, Morgan rode to the small cemetery where his wife was buried. He placed flowers on her grave, then set a second bouquet on the empty plot beside it. "I kept my promise, Emma," he whispered. "The ranch is safe, and I kept my promise to Captain Miller, too." He touched the empty plot. I always hoped we'd grow old together here, but maybe this land has other plans for me. As he rode back, he saw Sarah standing on the porch, silhouetted against the sunset, strong and determined where once she had been broken. Something stirred in Morgan's heart that he'd thought had died with Emma. Not quite love, not yet, but possibility. The good people of Rattlesnake Gulch slept better that night, but in a saloon 2 counties over, a man with a facial scar listened intently to tales of Blackwood's defeat. The stranger paid the storyteller well, then asked a single question. "This man Morgan, he has a bad leg from the war?" "That's what they say," the drunk replied. The scarred man smiled coldly. "Been looking for him since Antietam. Seems like Rattlesnake Gulch just got interesting." Morgan's war wasn't over yet, but that was a story for another day. If you enjoyed this tale of courage and justice in the untamed West, hit that subscribe button. Next week, we'll bring you The Bounty Hunter's Code, where a man's honor is tested against the highest bounty the territory has ever seen.